the 30th ADA anniversary for our times, commemorating the passage of this landmark legislation.
Good afternoon, and welcome to the Central New York celebration of the Americans with Disabilities Act. Every year, we celebrate this event in downtown Syracuse to acknowledge the passage of this landmark civil rights law on July 26, 1990. I'm Sally Johnston, and I'm here with my good friend Karen Franklin King, and we are going to MC this event for you today.
I'm delighted to be here with you today, Sally, as well. This is a unique, socially distant anniversary event. I've been an admirer of Sally's for her decades-long advocacy on the part of people with disabilities, and you are the perfect person to tell why the Americans with Disabilities Act is so important.
Thank you, Karen. What I thought I'd do is give a brief overview so the general public can gain an understanding of what ADA is. The Americans with Disabilities Act, the ADA, gave civil rights protection for individuals with disabilities similar to those provided to individuals on the basis of race, color, sex, national origin, age, and religion. It gave people with disabilities the same rights as the rest of our public takes for granted. Under ADA, people with disabilities have the same rights to access public facilities and participate in activities and services that the rest of our society takes for granted. The ADA protects people with disabilities from discrimination when applying for employment, protects their rights while on the job, and requires employees to offer reasonable accommodation so that people with disabilities are successful in their employment. ADA requires that all public transportation must be accessible. Before ADA, people with disabilities were not able to travel in the community. And now that we have accessible transportation, people are able to travel to the grocery store, to concerts, to events, to any event that they want in the community. The major part of ADA is the requirement that all states and local government offices and services be made accessible in addition to buildings. Physical accessibility, state and local government must eliminate any eligibility criteria for participation in programs, activities, and services that screen out persons with disabilities. The final section of ADA requires that all telecommunication services and devices be made accessible for people with disabilities. This included non-voice access to emergency services through 911 and creating relay services by phone for people who are deaf. Amendments to ADA passed in 2010 have focused on expanding the accessibility required under the ADA in technology and other services. So we've come a long way, Karen. I think this legislation has been very significant, and hopefully now the public has a little better understanding of what ADA is all about.
And this celebration certainly helps us to understand it even more. Thank you, Sally.
Sure. Thank you.
The passage of the ADA is clearly something to be celebrated. And to acknowledge the importance of the ADA locally, we welcome Syracuse Mayor Ben Walsh and Montanette Murphy from the Onondaga County Office of Diversity and Inclusion.
And the proclamation reads as follows. Whereas the Americans with Disabilities Act is a landmark piece of civil rights legislation that bans discrimination against people with disabilities and guarantees access to employment, state and local government facilities and services, public accommodations, telecommunications, and transportation. And whereas the Americans with Disabilities Act also outlines the changes needed to ensure increased participation in our communities by people with disabilities. When the ADA was signed by President George H.W. Bush on July 26, 1990, it liberated the energies and talents of millions of Americans with disabilities. And whereas on the 30th anniversary of the passage of the Americans with Disabilities Act into law, we celebrate all the advances in protecting the rights of all people with disabilities that get their backing by the ADA. In 1990, the Olmsted decision of the United States Supreme Court banned involuntary institutionalization of people with disabilities. In 2010, the Affordable Care Act brought parity to those living with mental health issues, chronic pain, and addictions.
Thank you, Montanette. I'll continue. Whereas the City of Syracuse and the County of Onondaga are pleased to join with such respected organizations as Access CNY, Arc of Onondaga, Arise, Aurora of CNY, Clear Path for Veterans, CNY Registry of Interpreters for the Deaf, David Clark Learning Center, Disabled in Action of Greater Syracuse, Elmcrest Children's Center, Exceptional Family Resources, Home Inc., Liberty Resources, Onondaga Community Living, Onondaga County Syracuse Commission on Human Rights, Self-Advocacy Association of New York State, and Whole Me Inc. In this formal recognition of the 30th anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act, and whereas the City of Syracuse and the County of Onondaga are proud of their cooperative working relationship with all of the organizations gathered here, and look forward to continuing the work with them to promote human dignity, self-sufficiency, and inclusion for all. Now therefore, I, Ben Walsh, Mayor of the City of Syracuse, and on behalf of Onondaga County Executive Ryan McMahon, do hereby proclaim the month of July 2020 as Disabilities Awareness Month in the City of Syracuse and Onondaga County. I'd just like to say thank you to Montanette for representing Onondaga County. I'd like to say thank you to Sally for all of your advocacy. This city's vision is for Syracuse to be a growing city that embraces diversity and creates opportunity for all. And thanks to the ADA, we are achieving that vision.
Thank you, Mayor Walsh and Ms. Murphy. Next, we are going to talk about a leader that we recently lost, an advocate who was a great advocate in our community. And I believe that Barry Gawanter will speak on that.
Mm-hmm. Here to share with us, to take a look at her advocacy, is Barry Gawanter.
Thank you, Karen and Sally. Donna Reese was a local civil rights leader and a champion for the underdog. She was also my colleague and my friend. She passed away in January 2020 after an unexpected illness. Donna first became an activist in 1994 after her nephew went missing with no explanation. She stepped up and strode far out of her comfort zone, but she would never stand down. Donna was fearless, and she always spoke the truth. She became the president of the local branch of the NAACP in 1998. She took on difficult topics and challenges, questioning police search practices in Syracuse and lobbying for a federal law to require independent investigation of civilian deaths in police custody. She remained strongly connected to the grassroots, but she also worked across boundaries and built bridges. She was also instrumental in the creation of the Pan-African Village at the New York State Fair. Donna worked day to day at Hutchings Psychiatric Center, but she had diabetes and glaucoma, and then she developed keratoconus, a cone-like deformation of the cornea. She endured multiple corneal transplants, a process that was like a roller coaster, losing sight, regaining it, and then finally losing her sight for good. She was devastated and not ready for life without sight. It took a while, but she rebounded. She learned to adapt, She joined Aurora's staff and embraced a special mission of telling people of color about the resources available for family members with sensory challenges. She became a mentor for people who had also lost their functional sight. Donna came to recognize the connections between civil rights and disability rights, and she evolved into an activist again, but this time for and with people of disabilities from all walks of life. Donna went everywhere to educate people about how to interact with, value, and accommodate people with disabilities. She told her story. She spoke from the heart. She helped people understand. She opened people's minds. She was a very effective speaker, and her lessons were valuable. All of this is why it is so appropriate that this award has been crafted and created in the name of Donna Reese. And now I'd like to invite Donna's family, her husband, and her children to accept this award.
Thank you so much, Barry, for those beautiful words. On behalf of the entire Reese family, thank you so much, ADA, for this beautiful, honorable award named after my mother, Donna Reese. She was looking forward to this year's ADA celebration. She loved the annual ADA parades. She loved all the speakers who attended every year. She loved being on the committee. She loved working for Aurora. Besides civil rights and social injustice, she dedicated her life to advocate for the disabilities community. And every year at the ADA celebration, what she will always say is ADA is here to stay. Thank you.
Isn't it odd we're not applauding? This is great. Yes, absolutely. And for the proclamation and for this celebration. Thanks to Barry and to the Reese family. This spring, we lost another friend, Joanne Jakowski. And here to tell us about Joanne's invaluable leadership and service to the deaf and hard of hearing communities is Stephen Redmond.
Joanne Jakowski was a nationally recognized certified interpreter of American Sign Language. She recently passed away this past March. She had over 40 years experience in all facets of sign language, in teaching at the college level, theatrical performances, and her work as an interpreter in the medical, theatrical, religious, and educational and legal settings in our community and throughout the United States. Joanne's dedication to the interpreting field was a value that she fostered from the beginning of her career and her many years of advocacy and service to the deaf and hearing communities of Central New York, and this is the legacy that she leaves to us. Joanne was very passionate in advocating for quality professional interpreting services for deaf and hard of hearing individuals, and to promote equal access to mainstream society. She used her unique gifts in interpretation to bridge the gap between two cultures, the hearing and the deaf community. She also wanted to facilitate a true connection between people who communicated in entirely different ways. She was truly ahead of her time, and she had such a bright smile and expressive eyes that could light up a room. Those of us who were fortunate to know her as an interpreter, as a teacher, and a colleague, but more importantly, as a friend, will be forever grateful for her presence in our lives. It's with great sadness that Joanne leaves us in our hearts, but memories we will cherish of her forever. Another thing about Joanne was that she was such a big advocate for deaf interpreters. The interpreting profession has evolved in the past decade, and with the world pandemic we are currently experiencing, you've probably seen 2 deaf interpreters interpreting the press conferences with the county executive here in Syracuse and Onondaga County. Both of the interpreters are deaf, and they are working with hearing interpreters who are also known as feeders. When Ryan McMahon speaks, the hearing interpreter or the feeder will listen, and they are facing the stage. You, of course, cannot see them. The hearing interpreter listens, and they start interpreting what Ryan McMahon is saying from spoken English to American Sign Language. The deaf interpreters pick up the American Sign Language from the feeder on a stage with Ryan, and then they start signing in their native language so that the deaf community has full access of what the message is being conveyed. So why 2 interpreters, you ask? One of the interpreters is using NSL, or Nepali Sign Language, and the other interpreter is using ASL, American Sign Language. We have a big Nepalese deaf community here in Syracuse, and it is very imperative that those people get full access to communication, especially now. It's same for the deaf community here in Syracuse. 30 years ago, we did not have deaf interpreters, and now we do. The city of Syracuse is doing the same. When Mayor Walsh does his press conferences, he has 2 deaf interpreters by his side interpreting to provide full access to communication for the deaf community. So recently you may have noticed that an example of this and how the ADA truly benefited the deaf community when Governor Andrew Cuomo did not have ASL interpreters during his daily conferences. The deaf community got together with our allies, and we used our voices to challenge this status quo. And the ADA generated the results we needed that was evident during the daily press conferences led by Governor Cuomo. It took a lawsuit, but we were successful. We got our deaf interpreter. We've come such a long way, and there's still a lot of work to do. But happy 30th, ADA.
Thank you, Stephen, and everyone. The ADA has resulted in many important advances for people with disabilities over its first 30 years. But the disability community still faces many problems that the ADA has not effectively addressed. Longtime activists Sally Johnston and right next to me, Agnes McCrae, will discuss some of the issues that still need to be tackled.
Where do we go from here, Agnes?
Well, I would say where we go from here, due to the fact that over 60% of individuals with extravagant differences are still unemployed. We go over to the future, which would be Zoom, since everybody is works from home now. As this is our new normal, it would be a great opportunity for persons of all abilities to be a part of our community in such a positive way, working and giving back. What a great way to independence.
Another piece of the problem with employment is that many people with disabilities live below the poverty level. And they want to work, but they are fearful that they will lose some of their services in Medicaid changes need to be made in the rules so that individuals can get a job and make a good living. They may have to pay in towards their care, but make it reasonable so that people will have a chance to have a job and live on their own independently.
Let's talk about the power of our vote, Sally. There's many issues in regards to voting at this time, but we still have many opportunities to do so. Some of the issues that we face is that it's very challenging at this time to vote by mail. I've been a voter for the past 21 years, and I've always voted by the DMV machines. And those are often not set up. Our right to vote are extremely important and invaluable. It's the way that we speak for ourselves and so many others within our
But we
our
can
community.
gain, Agnes, I believe that we can gain, get the help that we need when we go to vote. And the most important thing is to get out there and vote. It is our civil rights to be able to vote, and that's what we should do, right?
Yes, and so we applaud everybody in the community that has a stake in how we live our lives and continued independence. Let's start on the 30th birthday of the ADA and take the power of our vote is our strongest voice. And it's a true pathway in regards to how successful we are.
People without disability protection of the ADA, people with disabilities would not be able to live independently, raising families and contributing to our community. The single most important fight we have right now is our fight with the state elected officials and our governor. We're trying to, people with disabilities want to live independently in our communities. And with the Consumer-Directed Personal Assistance Program that saves money, we are able to live independently. And that is being jeopardized right now. And I think that Agnes, as a participant, can explain how it has helped her.
Well, I thank you very much, Sally. I've been a part of the Consumer Personal Assistance Program for the past 25 years. It's a true pathway to independence. I do not have to look over my shoulder to know that someone else will come in and make the decisions on my personal care needs. It also supports me as an advocate throughout my independent life and my journey. I call it a custom fit. From the nails to the hair, it truly works for me. It also helps as well with persons who speak different languages. We are able to hire who we want, who we prefer.
It allows us to live independently in our communities, and that's what we really want.
I tell you, I'm learning a lot. from what you have both said, Sally and Agnes both. And Agnes, I made a note of what you said about being able to be independent and the custom fit through the CDPA. So I'm learning. You know, anniversaries are typically for celebrating the past, but Sally and Agnes, thank you for sharing what you know and your ideas about where we need to go from here.
I can't believe this program is coming to an end, Karen. It has been wonderful working with you. It really has been exciting for me.
And Sally, you know I feel exactly the same way. And before we conclude, we want to thank our speakers, our interpreters, WCNY, and members of the ADA Celebration Committee for their work.
And thanks to all of you for joining us this afternoon.
Have a great day.